Invasive animals in Australia. What does invasive species mean exactly? When I thought about this, I actually didn't know what it was until I looked it up. Of course, there's so many different types of feral animals, things like that. Invasive species, in a sense, is an organism that is not from the area and has a negative impact on its surroundings. This could be like stray cats, wild boars, different organisms like that. Australia is one that has a very bad problem with the invasive species. They're threatening the environment, the agriculture areas, and social resources. Invasive species include diseases, fungi, and parasites, feral animals, and I'll have some examples of those in a minute, insects and other invertebrates, introduced marine pests, and weeds. That is a feral camel. This is a feral cat, a cat that has returned to the wild. This could be a stray cat is known as a feral cat. It's just something that is not in its natural habitat anymore. Actually, when I saw this, I have a cat of my own, so I thought, wow, a cat can be feral. I didn't know that they could be that bad to the environment. These, the cats and things, they can carry diseases once they're out in the wild. They can, kill certain animals that have made their lives in a certain place. Feral cats, once they have babies, then their babies are considered feral. They're not considered domestic cats or home cats, as you would call it. This is a feral pig, also known as a wild boar. Just like the cats, they can bring in diseases. Once they kill animals, then those animals are gone. They can spread the diseases throughout the animals that have already made their home there and is their natural habitat. The impacts of this are pretty significant. Plants and animals made their lives in Australia millions of years ago, and these animals have to fight daily for their lives due to the feral animals that have made their way to Australia and made that their new home. Feral animals have a very high reproductive rate, and if favorable, they can reproduce very, very quickly, which is a reason why they're multiplying so quickly and taking over. Feral animals have a huge impact by predation, competition for food and shelter, destroying a habitat, and lastly, spreading diseases, which is really a big thing with animals. I was reading in an article that I got, sorry, I'm shaking. The rabbit-eared bandicoot or billiby needs a constant supply of carbohydrate-rich seeds and roots. The feral animals, such as rabbits, they graze or degrade vegetation that provides food and shelter for them and other native animals. If the vegetation is destroyed or eaten by the feral animals, the billiby and other native species are under very great pressure because they have no food. They have nothing to survive on. The feral cats and the foxes, they hunt and kill the birds that have made Australia their home. They also kill mammals, reptiles, and then some insects. Feral animals can cause soil erosion too. While managed domestic livestock can be removed from degraded areas until these areas are revegetated, it is more difficult to keep feral animals out of the areas again. So, once they move the animals out of that area so it can revegetate, the feral animals are going to follow. They're going to go wherever that natural species is, and then once land is revegetated, they move them back, then the same thing's going to happen again. It's just a vicious cycle that keeps going on and on and on. There are several control methods for this: trapping, baiting, fencing, and shooting. That looks like feral pigs, maybe in a cage. Looks like they've trapped them. Before I go on, the Australian government is doing a lot to make sure that they get this taken care of. The Australian government is working with states and territories to develop strategies to help keep their environment safe and the animals that live there protected. The impacts of these are just phenomenal. So Australia has really taken this serious. It's not silly accusations or anything like that. Conventional control method, one of them is baiting. Baiting is usually done with poison known as 1080. 1080 grows naturally in Western Australia. The animals that live there and have made their home there, they have a higher tolerance for this. It's not going to make them sick. It's not going to kill them off because they're used to that. That's what they eat daily. For certain animals, people will bury the 1080 and dye it green. When they dye it green, the birds are less likely to pick it up. So the natural birds, they're not going to swoop down and pick this up to eat it. That way the feral animals will get there first. Foxes and pigs, they usually dig for their food. So people, again, will bury the 1080, and then the animals will come along, dig that 1080 up, and then eat it. And once they dig it up and ingest it, digest it, it kills them. Trapping is another one. Traps can include conventional traps, such as soft catch traps and yards. Yards are created around watering holes to catch those animals as they come to drink. Setting traps are high maintenance. You have to check them every day to make sure that the bait that is in the trap is still intact. Using the yard traps is more common because using the yard traps is not common because so many feral animals are trap shy. Just like anybody, they're not going to go into a strange place, because of the fear of getting trapped. Yeah, there's bait in there, and they'll do whatever they can to make sure that they actually get in there and get that without getting trapped. It's kind of like a mouse trap. You set the mouse trap, you put the cheese on it. Now somehow that little mouse is smart enough to get that cheese off that trap without being caught. So this is kind of the same concept. They make sure they do anything they can to get that bait without getting trapped. A biological control is killing off the feral animals with bacteria or viruses. In 1950, they actually released, I'm not going to try to pronounce this, myxomycosis was released to kill the feral animals. In over a 6-month time period, this killed over 90% of those rabbits. Now this is, let's see, get the definition. It's a highly infectious and usually fatal viral disease of rabbits causing swelling of the mucous membranes and the inflammation and discharge around the eyes. So it's a virus that they're releasing into the air. Mosquitoes or fleas, they have this virus, but because the mosquitoes and native fleas do not readily inhabit in dry areas, those aren't available to actually get on the animals, get on the feral rabbits to actually kill them, to put the disease in them. So with that being said, they release this in the air and it kills all those animals off. The 5 themes of geography, I had a little bit of a hard time with this, just because it's hard to put all this into these 5 things. Now, what I did was, the location of this presentation was in Australia, of course. I find Australia very interesting. As you've seen at the very beginning, I had a picture of a kangaroo. They are my absolute favorite. And with these feral animals, you know, they're killing all these native, I guess you could call them, animals off. Therefore, they're endangered, and there's not very many of them left. These feral species are located all across the country. They're not just in one specific location. They travel, they move, and they're not going to stay in one spot very long. And they reproduce. So, of course, they're taking over the native animals in their habitats. These animals live in a lot of different places, of course. Australia is huge, has a lot of flatlands and things like that for kangaroos and camels and koala bears and all your normal animals where they live. Australia actually has the most rare species in the world. 87% of Australia is made up of mammals, 93% of reptiles, and 45% of bird species, and those are species that are only found in the land down under. So they have so many different animals there, and again, these feral animals are coming in and they're killing them, they're giving them diseases, they're taking over their habitat, eating their food so they can't survive. Human environment, this could affect the humans in various ways. One of the major ones would be diseases. The feral animals are carrying diseases and spreading them rapidly. It's not uncommon to get bit by a cat. My cat bites me all the time. We're playing, of course, but so, you know, a human gets bit by a cat or a human gets attacked by a wild boar, then of course they have those diseases and they're going to spread those over to the humans. Another issue is the change in the landscape around the area. Humans become accustomed to their surroundings, and when feral animals take over, they change this. They change the land, they change the vegetation, they eat the food. So, you know, humans are kind of suffering from this too, not only with the disease, but feral animals eat their food, they grow their food. What are humans supposed to eat? What are they going to survive on? Movement. Feral animals do not just stay in one place. Again, they wander and move directions. So these animals are not just taking over one area, they're taking over a very large portion of the area. They're making sure that they, you know, reproduce and get out there and do what they're there to do. They want to make that place their home, their native home. The region, there are so many different regions in Australia. These different regions are made up of feral animals that are causing chaos with natural animals. You know, like I said, they're moving from here to there and everywhere and making sure that they set their making sure that they set their spot, mark their territory, I guess you could say. Australia also has, it's called environmental biosecurity. This is a protection of the environment and the social amenity from the negative effects associated with invasive species. It occurs across the entire biosecurity. They pre-border preparedness, border protection, and post-border management control. They protect the unique natural landscapes, including the ecosystem services that they provide and the quality of life. This is something that Australia, like I said, is very, very tuned in on. They want to make sure they get this done because, like I said, these animals are coming in and they're just completely destroying everything. That's all that I have for this. I hope you enjoy and save the animals.